Setting Personal Boundaries for Good Mental Health, brought to you by Prescriptive Health Solutions. Establishing clear boundaries is integral to the journey of self-discovery and maintaining a strong sense of identity. When we set boundaries, we define our limits, values, and what we consider acceptable behavior from others. This process of self-reflection nurtures self-awareness, allowing us to better understand our needs, desires, and the aspects that make us unique individuals. By honoring our personal boundaries, we cultivate self-respect and strengthen our ability to stay true to ourselves, even in challenging situations. This self-knowledge empowers us to make choices that align with our core beliefs, rather than bending to external pressures or societal expectations. The relationship between boundaries and emotional well-being is profound. Well-defined boundaries act as a buffer against stress, anxiety, and emotional burnout. They protect us from external demands that may overwhelm or drain us, allowing us to regulate our emotions more effectively. Lack of boundaries can also contribute to the development of the most common types of addiction, such as alcohol, substance abuse, or compulsive behaviors. When individuals struggle to set limits and prioritize their own needs, they may turn to addictive behaviors as a means of coping or even escaping from emotional distress. By establishing healthy boundaries, we create a foundation for emotional regulation and reduce the risk of developing unhealthy coping mechanisms. A study published by the Journal of Counseling Psychology found that individuals who struggle to set boundaries were more likely to experience higher levels of stress, emotional exhaustion, and depressive symptoms. And conversely, those who maintained healthy boundaries reported greater emotional stability and resilience. Let's examine the social dynamics of boundaries and conflict resolution. As we navigate relationships with healthy boundaries, we know that boundaries play a crucial role in shaping the dynamics of our relationships with family, friends, and colleagues. By communicating our limits and expectations clearly, we foster mutual understanding and respect within these connections. Clear boundaries serve as a foundation for effective conflict resolution. When our limits and expectations are well defined, it becomes easier to communicate our needs assertively, as well as find mutually agreeable solutions during disagreements. Research has shown that individuals who struggle with setting boundaries are more likely to experience increased conflict in their relationships. And by contrast, those who maintain healthy boundaries report higher levels of relationship satisfaction and better conflict management strategies. Boundaries provide a framework for respectful communication and negotiation. And when parties understand and respect each other's boundaries, conflicts can be addressed more objectively, without defensive reactions or personal attacks. This creates an environment conducive to finding compromise and resolving issues in a constructive manner. So how do we do this with family and friends and professional relationships? Let's explore this. Boundary setting can be challenging at first, especially when your education, training, or personal experiences may have led you to establish unhealthy boundaries to begin with. Boundaries are driven by our view of our value as a person. Listen to that again. Boundaries are driven by our view of our value as a person. Your value should not be based on your performance. It's necessary to recognize how you presently value yourself and determine if that view is accurate. Focus on practicing behaviors that support your positive self-worth. Determine healthy boundaries that you can clearly define. Mapping out boundaries for various aspects of your life takes time and diligence. Think about your relationships with your partner or your parents and your children, maybe your job and coworkers, and also your finances. And then ask yourself these questions shown on this slide, such as what relationships are bringing me stress and anxiety? Am I attempting to control someone's emotions, thoughts, or behavior? Do I feel mistreated or taken advantage of? Or does the value I feel from others change based on how well I fulfill their requests or their obligations? Do I need to adjust my responsibilities to align with the law of relationships? In family relationships, setting boundaries with loved ones can prevent resentment and promote healthy interdependence, allowing for emotional intimacy without sacrificing individual autonomy. Clear boundaries help establish appropriate roles and responsibilities within the family unit, reducing the risk of burnout or resentment from excessive caregiving or enabling behaviors. So let's dig into how to set personal boundaries with family members. The first step in setting boundaries is to identify your personal limits and needs. Reflect on your values, priorities, and the aspects of your life that feel compromised or overwhelming. This self-awareness will guide you in determining where boundaries need to be established or possibly even reinforced. Start by examining your physical, emotional, and mental energy levels. Are there areas where you consistently feel drained or depleted? Do certain activities, situations, or relationships leave you feeling exhausted or anxious? These could be indicators that boundaries may need to be set to protect your well-being. Once you've identified your boundaries, it's essential to communicate them clearly and assertively to others. Use I statements to express your needs without blaming or accusing, and be specific about your limits and expectations. When communicating boundaries, it's also important to explain the reasoning behind them. This fosters understanding and reduces the likelihood of resistance or even defensiveness from others. Now remember, you are not obligated to justify or negotiate your boundaries excessively. While it's helpful to provide context, ultimately your boundaries are personal choices that others need to respect. Setting boundaries with family can be challenging, especially if there are ingrained patterns or expectations. So start by having an open and honest conversation, explaining your needs for boundaries and the reasons behind them. Remain compassionate but firm, and be prepared to enforce consequences if necessary. Seeking support from a therapist or a counselor can also be helpful in navigating complex family dynamics. Let's examine friendships. Healthy boundaries in friendships prevent emotional burnout, ensure fairness, and help manage expectations, fostering deeper, more fulfilling connections. They establish guidelines for acceptable behavior and communication patterns, and the level of emotional support that's expected. This reduces the potential for misunderstandings or imbalances in the relationship. Let's examine how to set personal boundaries with friends. Again, identify your personal limits and needs. Reflect on your values, priorities, and the aspects of your life that feel compromised or overwhelming with friends. This self-awareness will guide you in determining where boundaries need to be established or reinforced. Examine your physical, emotional, and mental energy levels. Are there areas where you consistently feel drained or depleted, especially with certain friends? Do certain activities, situations, or relationships leave you feeling exhausted or anxious? For example, you have friends that all they want to do is go out and drink, or you have friends that only want to go out and go shopping when you don't have the budget to do so. These are indications that boundaries may need to be set to protect your well-being. Communicate boundaries clearly and assertively to others, and use I statements to express your needs without blaming or accusing, and be specific about your limits and expectations. This will help foster understanding and reduce the likelihood of resistance or defensiveness from others. And remember, you are not obligated to justify or negotiate your boundaries excessively. Shifting to professional relationships. In the workplace, well-defined boundaries create a positive work-life balance. It protects against overcommitment and promotes a respectful, productive environment. And by setting limits on work hours, responsibilities, and communication channels, such as email, social media, texting, we can avoid burnout and maintain a healthy separation between our professional and personal lives. So, how do we set personal boundaries with professional colleagues? Again, you're going to see the same template and the same line of questioning. Identify your personal limits and your needs in the workplace. Reflect your values, your priorities, and the aspects of your life that feel compromised or overwhelmed with your workplace friends and colleagues. Again, this is all about self-awareness and helps you reinforce and determine where boundaries need to be established. Examine your physical, emotional, and mental energy levels among coworkers and colleagues. Are there areas where you consistently feel drained or depleted? While these are the same questions with friends and family, it's no different here, except that the environment has changed. So checking in and reestablishing all of these aspects in that specific environment creates that self-awareness to help understand how and where those boundaries need to be established. Let's face it, enforcing boundaries can be challenging, especially when others resist or disregard them altogether. In these instances, it's crucial to remain consistent and firm in upholding your boundaries. Calmly reiterate your limits and the consequences for crossing them, and be prepared to follow through on those consequences if necessary. If someone persistently violates your boundaries, it may be necessary to create physical or emotional distance, limit interactions, or even end certain relationships. I know this can be difficult, but prioritizing your well-being is essential, especially in cases of toxic or abusive behavior. Remember, boundary violations are not a reflection of your worth, but rather an indication that the other party needs to adjust their behavior to respect your boundaries. So let's review. Setting and maintaining healthy boundaries is a critical component of self-care and overall mental well-being. By establishing clear limits and expectations, we cultivate self-awareness, emotional regulation, and stronger, more fulfilling relationships. While the process may present challenges, the long-term benefits of an enhanced self-esteem, independence, and improved mental health outcomes makes the effort well worth it. Embrace the journey of boundary setting with patience, self-compassion, and a commitment to honoring your authentic needs. You're worth it. Thanks so much for joining us today.